Growing up, life was a constant shuffle because of my dad's military career. We moved from base to base, each place offering a new beginning but never a lasting one. The experience made me adaptable, but I longed for a stable home, a place to call my own. Early on, I decided that one day, I'd open my own business, build roots, and create something lasting. After college, with degrees in Arabic and computer science, I enlisted in the Army. My language skills got me a role as a translator in tense regions of the Middle East. During that time, I developed an interest in security tech, understanding its importance in both personal and national safety. Those years shaped my post-military career, leading me to combine my technical skills with a mission to help keep people safe. When I left the military, I set my sights on opening a computer and security equipment store in the Chicago suburbs. I was aiming for a spot between two Best Buy stores and near a busy shopping area. On the second day of searching, I saw a "For Rent" sign on an empty storefront that looked perfect. As I peered inside, the doors suddenly swung open, giving me a good jolt. Two women stepped out, chuckling at my startled reaction. "Sorry to scare you," one of them said with a grin. "We didn't expect someone peeking around in broad daylight." "Reflex," I replied with a half-smile. If I'd had a rifle, there'd be a couple of holes in that door. But I'd hate to hurt two charming ladies. "You're military, not SWAT, aren't you?" the taller woman joked. "Looking to rent?" "Yes," I replied. "Is this space available?" The shorter woman stepped forward, shaking my hand. "I'm Linda Carter, the leasing agent, and this is Rachel Bennett, our banker." "Nice to meet you." "I'm Bob," I said, glancing at the store. "Rent's probably out of my league, though." Linda gave a friendly nod. "We're verifying the lease terms for credit files. When we get enough tenants, the bank might lower the loan rate." "What's the rent?" I asked. "$1, $200 a month, plus electricity," she replied. I turned to Rachel. "And the minimum lease term?" "6 months or more," she answered. I thought for a moment. "Linda, how about $1,000 a month if I pay for a full year up front?" She accepted the offer right away and turned to Rachel. "He could be a great bank customer." Rachel handed me her card, giving me a once-over. I then offered to drive her to the bank and suggested grabbing lunch afterward. She accepted, eyeing my Corvette. "Do you have time for lunch?" I asked. "Yes," she replied with a grin. "Great," I said, tossing her the keys. "Why don't you drive us?" She hesitated. "I've never driven a stick before." "No problem," I said, ready to teach her. With determination, she slid into the driver's seat, eyes locked on the gear shift as she practiced. After a few rocky starts, she managed to get us to an Italian place for lunch. "So, what's got you so jumpy that two women opening a door freaked you out?" she asked once we were seated. I smirked. "I spent 2 years in the Middle East as an infantryman. When a door swings open unexpectedly over there, you're either ready to shoot or you're dead. Since I didn't have my rifle, I was ready to chuck a pin." She laughed. "What made you sign up for something so dangerous?" "Well," I started, leaning back. "My dad's a U.S. Army colonel, and my mom's an Iranian nurse. They met when he was doing radio intercept work in Iran before the Shah fell. They got married, had me, and I grew up bouncing from base to base. Eventually, I went to college, got degrees in Arabic and computer science, and decided joining the Army was my way of giving back. My language skills landed me a job as a translator in active zones." "Was it as intense as you thought?" "Ever get shot at?" she asked, genuinely interested. "More than I expected," I said, grinning. "And yes, I got hit once. Maybe after our third date, I'll show you my scars." She smiled back. "Third date? Do I get a say in that?" "If you're up for it, I could break tradition and show you on the second date," I teased, making her laugh. Lunch was great, and when the check came, she insisted on picking it up. "It's on the bank," she said with a wink. "I'm always looking for good customers." As we headed back to the bank, she joked, "The girls will be jealous seeing me pull up in this." "Then make it memorable," I encouraged. "Hop out, flash some leg, and toss me the keys." She did just that, laughing as she strutted over to the bank. A few minutes later, I gave her a call. "What time should I pick you up for dinner on Saturday?" I asked. "Who's this?" she teased. A guy lets a girl drive his Corvette, and she forgets him already? She laughed. Bob, I didn't recognize your voice. 7 works. I'll dress up. Saturday couldn't come soon enough. When I saw her, I couldn't help but say, you look stunning. You'll be the talk of the VFW. She rolled her eyes. Take me to the VFW, and you'll never get to show off those scars. Actually, I've got us reservations at Capitol Grill, I offered. Perfect. But do we have time for a glass of wine first? She asked. I'd love to see how a successful banker lives, I replied. Welcome to my little apartment, she said with a laugh. I'm doing all right, but I've got big dreams. Looking around, I noticed a diploma from Northwestern on the wall. What was your major? Finance, she replied. It fits my banking job, but my real goal is real estate development. A few years in finance should teach me everything I need to know. As Rachel and I drove to dinner, she opened up about her college years and her ambitious plans. There was something about her energy and determination that kept me intrigued. We had a perfect evening, great food, wine, and the kind of conversation that flows easily. During dessert, she asked, So, how did your computer skills come into play while you were in the Army? I chuckled. Funny story. On my first combat mission in Mosul, we raided an insurgent's house and found a few old computers my squad was ready to smash. I stopped them, figuring we might find valuable intel on them. When I handed them to the G2 officer, he laughed and said, What are we supposed to do with this junk? No one can work with Arab computers. I grinned, remembering. I told him, Sir, I'm not just a translator. I can operate the computers too. Next thing I knew, I was sitting in front of those machines, watched by a few high-ranking officers as I sifted through documents. Did you find anything? She asked, leaning in. Oh, more than I bargained for. I found an attack plan scheduled for 0200 hours the next day. We planned airstrikes in response, hitting them first. From then on, I was reassigned to Intel, searching captured computers for useful info. Like what? Bank records, mainly. Insurgents relied on numbered accounts to pay for everything. Guns, food, bribes. I felt like it was my duty to disrupt that flow. She raised an eyebrow. How exactly? I hesitated, weighing how much to tell her. I had enough info to move the money, but only knew one account number by heart, my own in Chicago. So, I temporarily redirected their funds to my account. Then, I rerouted the money to an untraceable Swiss account. Using my personal laptop helped keep it off the military's radar. She laughed in disbelief. So you just redirected their money? Something like that, I shrugged. I left that part out of my resume. So that's why your book's called How I Beat the Enemy from My Desk, she said, grinning. But tell me, did you get any injuries from all that computer warfare? I laughed, playing along. That's a secret reserved for the second date. She rolled her eyes, and we decided to hit a nearby club. We danced, laughed, and by the time I dropped her off, she looked at me and asked, Want to come in for a bit? Sure, I said, following her in. After a few glasses of wine, I figured it was time to head out. Was tonight good enough to earn a second date? I asked as I got up. Definitely, she replied, smiling. I still need to see that war wound. Before I could leave, she pulled me in for a long, warm kiss that had me calling her for our next date sooner than I'd planned. For our second date, we had dinner and caught a jazz concert. During intermission, she leaned over and whispered, So, am I going to see that war wound tonight? How about back at your place? I teased. Fine by me, she replied with a playful smile. When we got to her apartment, I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small box. Wait, is that a proposal? She joked, raising an eyebrow. I laughed. No, that's for date 6. This here's my purple heart. Go on. Open it. She lifted the lid, reading the label. Shell fragment in the eye? I pointed to a faint scar on my eyelid. Believe it or not, I was cooking an omelet, and a bad egg exploded, sending a piece into my eye. Medical reports said, shell fragment. And so, I got a purple heart. She burst out laughing, shaking her head. That's one for the books. After that, we grew closer. A few weeks later, I hired an office manager, Martha Dixon. a seasoned pro who had been married to a cop and knew her way around tech. She'd been laid off by Best Buy, and I was glad to have someone with her experience on board. Things were great. Work was smooth, and my relationship with Rachel was going well. But one day, two men from the CIA showed up at my office. They flashed their badges and said they needed to talk. My heart sank. I had no idea what they wanted. They started by asking if I'd noticed any unusual activity around the enemy facilities we'd captured. I kept my expression neutral, though inside I was tense. They didn't accuse me of anything outright, but they mentioned that recent hacks of rebel computers had revealed complaints about an American siphoning their funds. I stayed quiet, letting them continue. They explained they needed someone with my skills as a private contractor and laid out the terms. $20,000 a month, plus a tempting bonus, keeping the first $500,000 of any recovered funds, with the rest going to them. They noticed my knack for draining insurgent accounts and wanted me to keep at it, legally this time. The implication was clear. If I didn't accept, they might start investigating my past redirections. By the end of my tour, I'd accumulated over $1 million in a Swiss account and about $300,000 back home in Chicago. The CIA was eager to see me keep up my work, and the offer was hard to turn down. But things with Rachel were getting serious, and for once, I was hesitant to dive back into that line of work. Rachel saw the $20,000 a month paycheck as an opportunity we couldn't ignore, though I didn't mention the extra bonuses. Needing a change from her apartment, she moved in with me. I installed top-of-the-line security equipment, allowing me to monitor everything remotely, and offered her free use of it while covering all the bills. I planned my CIA work in the Middle East with 3-month rotations, aiming to avoid burnout and keep my relationship with Rachel intact. My first stop was Langley, where the officers made it clear I was a valuable asset, though somewhere between a computer and a drone. The deal had strict rules, any slip-ups, and they'd terminate it. If anyone died because of my actions, they had the right to liquidate me or seize the funds I'd accumulated. The next 3 months were intense, with round-the-clock work at a command center, analyzing data from captured computers. I managed to map insurgent connections, leaving some money in their accounts as bait. Rachel and I FaceTimed daily despite the time difference, our calls keeping me grounded. I also joined the Marines on the compound for physical training, earning their respect after they learned I was an Army brat working with the CIA. After the first 3-month stretch, I met with the lead officer to review my progress. He was pleased with the intel I'd gathered and didn't ask about the funds I'd diverted. I didn't bring it up, either. When asked if I'd extend my tour, I replied, I'm heading back to Illinois to marry the most beautiful woman there. I'll be back in 3 months to keep working. Before leaving, I trained their raiding units on what to prioritize when capturing computers, set up a protocol to bypass terrorist defenses, and arranged remote access so I could continue tracking information from Chicago. When I finally arrived at O'Hare, Rachel's smile was worth every minute of the wait. Our relationship had grown real, and I was ready to take it further. I sent her a bouquet with a note. You're more beautiful than these flowers. Join me for dinner this Saturday, somewhere special. Might want a new dress. She had no idea our restaurant was actually a penthouse suite at the Hyatt, complete with dinner on a balcony overlooking the city, a string quartet, and her favorite dishes. I'd even scattered rose petals in the bedroom. As we stepped into the Hyatt lobby, Rachel practically floated, grinning at the stares from passers-by who must have thought we were celebrities. Our private waiter served champagne, and we enjoyed the city lights while the quartet played softly. After a perfect dinner and chocolate volcano dessert, I revealed a small purple velvet box under a silver cover. Her hands shook as I got down on one knee. Will you be my wife? I asked. She barely let me finish before saying, absolutely. Our wedding was simple. Neither of us had large families. We honeymooned in Savannah, soaking in southern charm before returning to work. Back home, she introduced me to her circle of realtors and developers. I rotated 3 months abroad and 3 months stateside, keeping up with my CIA work and nurturing our marriage. On our first anniversary, I casually asked if she knew any realtors who could help us find a nice house. She looked surprised. What kind of house do you want? She asked. My lovely wife can decide, I replied, as long as the total cost, including furnishing and remodels, doesn't go over $1 million. She stared at me, shocked, thinking it was some kind of joke. I reassured her, explaining, I have investments you don't know about. We can afford it. I wanted to make sure you married me for love, not money. She smirked, called me a prick, and said it would be a cash deal. Rachel found a great deal with a couple eager to sell fast. She handled the remodel while I kept up with updates via FaceTime. I insisted on a state-of-the-art security system with hidden cameras and mics. A reliable source had warned me that insurgents weren't pleased about their lost funds, and I wasn't about to be an easy target. I called Martha at the computer store for advice on a top-notch private investigator, and she recommended Frank White, one of our best clients. He's thorough and professional, though not cheap, she said. He buys all his high-end surveillance equipment here. Want his number? The consultation with Frank was productive. He understood exactly what I needed and installed everything to my specifications. Most of the house's electronic equipment integrated with my personal system, allowing me to monitor and control everything remotely. Rachel was thrilled with the new place, pouring her love into decorating and growing her social connections in the Home Builders Association, all while expanding her loan portfolio at the bank. During my 4th year in the field, I started noticing subtle changes in how Rachel greeted me. The warm welcomes that used to come with a hug and kiss gradually turned into complaints, usually about my luggage or the time I returned. I shrugged it off initially, chalking it up to the natural ebb and flow of any relationship, especially with the strain of my CIA rotations. But it gnawed at me, a quiet warning I couldn't shake. It seemed that with the distractions of dating gone and me off and away, Rachel had thrown herself fully into her career, making connections with real estate developers and building a solid name for herself. While I wanted to believe our marriage was stronger than ever, part of me sensed a growing distance. Still, I brushed it aside, focusing on my work and hoping time would fix things once I could be home more often. The last 2 times Rachel picked me up, her impatience showed. She barely looked up from her phone, telling me to just take an Uber home. I'm busy. After 3 weeks at home, I felt the tension thickening. Honey, you seem distracted, I said. Anything I can help with? Problems at work? No, I'm fine, she replied curtly, setting off a warning in my combat-trained mind. Minutes later, she blurted, we have nothing in common anymore. You're gone half the year, and even when you're here, you're glued to that computer. What are you, some kind of Iranian spy? I closed my laptop, giving her my full attention. No, I'm not a spy. I work for the Department of Defense, gathering information from terrorist computers. It's important for our country. Well, that just makes you boring. Uninteresting. And I don't like it, she snapped. What can I do to be more interesting? I asked, keeping calm. She shrugged. Knock me off my feet. Make me feel important. All right, let's go to Vegas or LA for 2 weeks. No work, just us. You pick the shows and activities. I'll take care of everything else, I suggested. That sounds decent. I'll think about it, she said. So, what do you want to see? I just want to see my wife happy, I replied simply. The next morning, I began planning. The trip wasn't just about fixing things. I wanted to get a sense of where Rachel's mind really was. Was she seeing someone else? I decided it was time to call Mr. White, the private investigator, and laid it out. I need your help monitoring my wife's activities. A tracker on her Audi would be helpful, and I've already installed a beacon on her cell. I'll be out of the country from September to November, but reachable by phone and email. Understood, White replied, businesslike. We'll set up a car tracker. Also, you've got a sophisticated camera system already installed, so we can pull any needed info from that. I nodded. There's also talk of a bounty on my head from some Middle Eastern rebels. I'm concerned for Rachel's safety, but I don't want her to know. That'd only scare her. I need to know if she's having an affair. She could be a target, or it could be a way for someone to get to me. He nodded thoughtfully. You're well prepared, Mr. Smith. Just know that my services are comprehensive, but come with a price. There's an upfront fee and monthly charges depending on the level of monitoring. I understand, I said. I'll transfer the first month's payment right away. While I left the heavy lifting to Mr. White, I started my own investigation. I checked Rachel's closet, every shoebox, her clothes pockets. Nothing. Then, in the hall closet, I found a small travel bag secured with a tiny lock. I managed to pop it open with a paperclip and found a set of French lingerie, cheap clothing, and well-worn shoes. The pieces didn't add up. It was clear she was meeting someone. Back in my office, I noticed screwdriver marks on the file cabinet. Someone had been looking through my tax returns and investments, likely gearing up for divorce proceedings. My offshore accounts were safe, but it was a jarring sign she might be preparing for alimony negotiations. My weapon safe, thankfully, was untouched. I decided to test her with a dinner invite. I left a voicemail and a text, adding a new dress on the table for her to wear. After dressing in my best suit, I checked her phone tracker around 6:15. She was at a high-end office building near her bank. By 7:20, she hadn't moved, and I was sitting alone at Lockheed Restaurant. I ordered a bottle of her favorite wine, noticing the sympathetic glances from other diners. At 7:30, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "Hi, honey. Please forgive me, Bob. My phone died, and I missed your messages," she said. "I understand," I sighed, barely holding back my frustration. "But I'm still here at the restaurant, trying to do something nice for you. Are you still coming?" "Yes, Bob. I just finished a soup, and my salad's on the way," she replied. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. "Really sorry, Bob." "Good. You'll make it just in time for dessert and drinks," I replied. I had just finished a ribeye steak when Rachel rushed in, looking disheveled with her blouse wrinkled and hair a mess. "I can't apologize enough, Bob. You went to all this trouble, and I ruined it. What can I do to make it up to you?" she asked. I gestured for her to sit. "Have you eaten yet? If not, order something. I'll get dessert, and you can tell me about your day." "No, I'm starving. Heard they have a great triple chocolate brownie here," she said. "Perfect," I replied. "And a scotch on the rocks for me." "So, how was your day?" "It was hectic," she said, rubbing her temples. "The bank messed up a mortgage on that shopping center on Douglas Street. The borrowers thought they were mortgaging just one building, but the bank thought it was two." "Sounds complicated," I said, masking my suspicion. "Did it take all day?" "No," she replied, seeming defensive. "Started in the afternoon and went until now." "Who was handling these negotiations?" I asked. She frowned. "Why all the questions, Bob? It was just another work day. After you ignored my calls and texts, leaving me waiting alone at dinner, I think I deserve to know what kept you," I said, keeping my tone steady. "Is that unreasonable?" She sighed. "No, it's not out of line, but I don't like being interrogated like I'm hiding something." I met her gaze, my voice calm but firm. "Well, Rachel, are you hiding something, or someone, from me?" "No, I'm not hiding anything." Rachel snapped. "Then why so defensive?" I asked calmly. "I'm just making small talk. Most spouses ask about each other's day, including who they worked with. But if you think it's too invasive, we can stick to safe topics like the weather." "Don't be so smart, Bob," she muttered. I tried to lighten the mood by commenting on the warm weather, and she went along reluctantly. "No, I didn't leave the office. They brought sandwiches, which I hate, so that probably put me in a bad mood," she admitted. "It's okay, honey. I love you, grumpy or not," I said, hoping to ease the tension. The rest of dinner was more relaxed, though I suspected she was lying. When she went to the restroom, I checked her phone. It was 75% charged, contradicting her earlier dead phone excuse. Later at home, she immediately showered, which was unusual unless she'd been out somewhere. The investigation was off to a strong start. In Illinois, infidelity isn't grounds for divorce, but irreconcilable differences would justify one. My focus was on protecting my assets. While reallocating my Swiss portfolio, Rachel caught me off guard, entering my office quietly. "What are you looking at?" she asked, 4 feet behind me. I decided not to hide anything, just moving some investments around, thinking between Google and Amazon. Ignoring the details, her eyes fixed on the balance, $3,646,962.44. "Is this your money?" "Yes," I admitted, keeping calm. "It's my account in Switzerland, money I made trading goods while stationed in Afghanistan." "Why not transfer it here so I can spend it?" she asked with a sly smile. "Keeping it offshore avoids major income taxes. Plus, The million you spent on our house came from that income. It was a gift to you, I explained. Are there other accounts you haven't told me about? She pressed. Yes, I replied. How many and how much? She demanded. I smiled. You've used your one honest answer for today. She huffed but then jumped into my arms, laughing. Fine, but surprise me. I need a Ferrari and a bigger house. Listen, I said, holding back a sigh. We can blow the money now, or I can triple it in 2 years. Would you rather have $10 million in 2 years, or $3.6 million now? I buy you a new Audi every year, remember? Her mood softened. All right, but don't keep me waiting forever, she teased before heading back to work. As she left, I realized I hadn't handled it as well as I could have, but it ended better than I'd expected. I was glad I'd been mostly honest. Maybe our marriage wasn't doomed after all, but I knew I had to prepare for the worst just in case. I rented a storage unit, stashed personal items, backed up my data, and packed clothes for a quick exit. This wasn't a sign of giving up, just a strategic withdrawal plan. The next step took me to Langley to see my CIA supervisor. I requested a new identity, explaining the increasing threat from Middle Eastern rebels who had placed a bounty on my head. 2 weeks later, I was given a new identity, Adam Sanders, complete with a fresh passport, driver's license, social security number, and job history. I also made arrangements with Martha Dixon, transferring ownership of my store assets to her through a buy-sell agreement. Martha, I have a bad feeling about my next trip. If I don't make it back, all store assets go to you. You're buying the assets, not the corporation. So any tax issues stay with the corporation, I explained. The purchase price is $50,000. Do you have any questions? She looked concerned. Why are you doing this for me? You've been a great friend and business partner, Martha, I said sincerely. But there's one catch. If you ever hear from a man named Adam Sanders, do whatever he asks without telling anyone, even your husband. I guarantee it won't involve anything illegal. He's saved my life more than once. Do we understand each other? She nodded. I understand, Bob, but please don't talk like that. It feels like bad luck. That's my wish too, I replied, but I want to make sure you're taken care of if things go sideways. Rachel seemed to be in a better mood, promising to be a more passionate wife. She practically set our mattress on fire with her enthusiasm, which left me hopeful. Meanwhile, Mr. White reported no suspicious activity on her end, but I stayed cautious. Though things felt better, I knew my preparations were necessary. Rachel was frequently visiting a luxury apartment building owned by Victor Kane, often spending hours there. The following week, she set aside 3 evenings for a Home Builders Association seminar and convention, casually mentioning she'd be home late each night. I saw the convention materials on the kitchen table and noted a formal dance on Saturday. Looks like a big event, I said. Spouses are invited. Mind if I join? You keep saying I need to get out more, and we haven't gone to a dance in ages. She looked uncomfortable. You wouldn't know anyone, and I'll be busy networking. You might be bored without a computer to keep you occupied. Ignoring her jab, I replied, you wanted me to change, so I'm trying. Let me be the husband you want. Reluctantly, she agreed. I let Mr. White know about the party, and he arranged to record audio from Rachel's purse, giving me a microphone to discreetly record if needed. On Saturday night, I dressed in my best suit and waited in the living room. Rachel came downstairs looking stunning in a sleek black dress, and despite everything, I couldn't help but admire her. You look amazing, I told her, and she gave me a small smile, glancing at my newest Corvette parked outside. At the venue, we found our way to the table reserved by her bank, with a prime view of the dance floor. Rachel introduced me as her husband, which seemed to surprise some of her friends. One woman smiled and teased, Rachel, you said your husband was a computer nerd. Who's this handsome stud? Rachel forced a smile. Why don't you tell them what you do, Bob? I own a computer store on Harrison Street and work with the Army in the Middle East, I replied, watching her face tighten at my direct answer. Not exactly a nerd's job, is it? She managed to say, you'll always be my favorite nerd. Now, get us some drinks while I mingle. I joined a long line at the bar, overhearing 2 realtor ladies in front of me. There's Rachel, one said, reeling in clients with that blue dress. She worked hard to secure loans for that new high-rise. Yes, day and night, mostly at night, her friend replied with a laugh. Did you see that ring on her finger? I wonder if her husband knows how much relationship building she does. She calls him a computer nerd who's rarely around. Their comments echoed in my mind as I returned to our table, only to find Rachel missing. I spotted her nearby, surrounded by 4 men who seemed captivated. I made my way over, handing her the wine she'd requested. She looked shocked that I'd invaded her space and introduced me with minimal enthusiasm. A short, wiry man extended a hand. Nice to meet you, Mr. Markshall. I'm Victor Kane. Rachel said you're the top real estate man in town, I replied, recognizing his name. Oh, your wife mentioned you're quite the investor yourself, he said with a smirk. I shot Rachel a look. I didn't realize she was sharing my investment strategies. Kane shrugged. Oh, she was just surprised by the size of your portfolio. I forced a smile. Good to know. I'll have to be more careful about keeping those details private. Turning to Rachel, I said, Now, if you'll excuse us, I'd like a dance with my wife. Setting our drinks aside, I led her to the dance floor. Leaning in, I whispered, You need to calm down and remember we're here as a couple. If you want to protect your career and our marriage, act happy. Smile and pretend we're having a good time. Surprisingly, she took a few deep breaths and managed to smile. As we danced, she finally said, I didn't appreciate the way you confronted me. I understand, but you need to keep my finances out of your conversations. I don't trust anyone else with that information, not even you. Her face showed shock. You don't really mean that, do you? How often do I lie to you? I replied. Better yet, how often do you lie to me? Caught off guard, she hesitated. I've never caught you in a lie, she said, avoiding the second part of the question. Just then, one of the men from her group came over, tapping my shoulder. Mind if I cut in and dance with your wife? Sorry, I replied with a tight smile. Tonight's a special night for us, and we're not dancing with anyone else. He nodded and stepped back. As we continued dancing, Rachel's unease was palpable. Why are you being so protective tonight? She asked, keeping her tone light but wary. Because I'm seeing things I don't like, I replied. There's a difference between business networking and sharing personal details, and I think you know that. She tensed, then forced a laugh. Well, maybe I just wanted people to know how lucky I am. That's fine, but let's not give anyone ideas about your availability, especially people like Victor Kane. Her eyes narrowed, and she whispered sharply, You don't get to control what I say to my friends. I met her gaze calmly. Just remember, we're supposed to be here as a couple. The rest of the evening was tense, but we kept up appearances. I stayed close, watching how she interacted with her colleagues, particularly Kane. By the end of the night, I felt more certain than ever that something was off. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I was getting closer to uncovering the truth. After a few dances, we returned to our table, but I'd had enough. I'm done here, Rachel. Are you coming home or staying? I asked. I'm torn. This is my job, and there are people I need to spend time with, she replied. But how will I get home? Call a cab, Uber, or get a room. You're a big girl who makes decisions every day. My decision is to go home. Your choice is yours. She gave me a strange look as I kissed her engagement ring. I love you, baby, I said. I love you too, she replied quietly. As I left, I texted Mr. White, letting him know Rachel was at the Hyatt and we'd soon have more information. He confirmed his equipment was in place and already collecting data. She didn't come home that night. By noon the next day, she arrived by Uber, her dress wrinkled. Thanks for being so understanding, she said, heading straight to the shower. I wondered aloud when Hyatt rooms stopped having showers but held my tongue. I'd like some coffee and toast before bed, if you don't mind. As I placed toast with her favorite jam on her plate, I asked, What did you do after I left? Oh, I danced with Mike Harper, that guy you refused to dance with, she said casually. Talked with about 20 or 30 people. Just made sure they knew I valued them. She conveniently left out whether she'd gone to her own room or someone else's, nor did she mention where she'd had breakfast. I'd soon find out from Mr. White. We met in his office at 10 a.m. on Monday. If you don't mind, Bob, he began, I'll give you a summary of what we found, starting with Rachel's cell location and activity. According to his report, she'd visited Kane's building several times. Last week, she had lunch there with Mike Harper on the 14th floor. Later, White recordings revealed that Rachel had been telling Harper she was disappointed in my involvement at the convention, adding that she would rather be with him to eat, dance, and make love all night. She also explained to him that she planned to pretend to be drunk to avoid going home. Harper had made a derogatory remark about me, and Rachel cut him off, reminding him not to insult her husband because he was useful for business connections. In another call, she told him, "I've decided. You need $3 million for the condo, and I can get that from Bob by selling part of that cinder. I'll become an investor." Harper had laughed, asking, "Where'd that nerd get all that money?" "If he has $3 million, that's $3 million more than you," she replied coldly. "Let's put the divorce on hold until I know his cash position. Better to stay married and control his money than divorce and get half." After I left the dance, she had invited Harper to join her, saying, "Bob's gone home, but he may have someone watching. Let's be careful. This will be our only dance tonight. I'll get a room and call you after midnight." Mr. White looked at me carefully. "Mr. Markshall, I'm not going to replay what happened after midnight or the next morning. They aren't words a husband should hear, but I'll keep them on file if you ever need them." "Thank you," I said slowly. "Please continue surveillance for 2 more weeks, then stop. I'd like to listen to some of the recordings." White nodded. "Understood. I'll keep you informed." I thanked him for helping me stay focused and sane, and after leaving his office, I began making final preparations. I closed all my IRAs, knowing John Markshall would pay taxes on the withdrawals. I changed the beneficiary on my life insurance to the Wounded Warriors Project, maxed out joint credit cards on gold Krugerrands, and traded my Corvette for Bitcoin. As John, I signed a power of attorney for Adam Sanders, my new identity, and transferred my assets to accounts in Grand Cayman. I moved all valuables out of my weapons safe, leaving a flat box containing $1,000 in 20s with tear gas bait money. Anyone opening it would get a nasty surprise. I left the safe's combination on a slip of paper, knowing it was only a matter of time before Rachel would try it. Rachel subtly hinted at the mall investment again, so I told her to prepare a full analysis, hoping to keep her busy while I wrapped up my exit plans. I contacted a realtor in Scottsdale, Arizona, looking for a $3 million Adobe-style home with a pool, mountain views, and a golf course nearby. I had no feelings left for Rachel, only the satisfaction of outsmarting her. My only desire now was to escape this tangled life and build something better. I told Rachel I had to go to DC for work and booked a flight to Phoenix instead, planning to buy the new house. She didn't even offer to drive me to the airport, likely happy for my departure, so she could meet with Harper. In Phoenix, I opened new accounts as Adam Sanders, transferring $4 million, $3 million from the Swiss account, and $1 million from Grand Cayman. I bought a beautiful house and arranged for the realtor to store my new purchases securely until I was ready to move in. Using the motion-activated cameras, I monitored the house remotely but saw no signs of a lover. Meanwhile, Rachel worked on a shopping center prospectus, convinced she was drawing me into her scheme. When I returned to Chicago, she met me at the airport with enthusiasm. "Welcome home, my wonderful husband. I've missed you," she said with a smile. "It's been a long trip," I replied, keeping my own emotions under control. Early the next morning, I slipped out of the house to meet Mr. White, who had important updates. He'd recorded Rachel visiting the Leo building, meeting with Harper and then Kane, discussing how they'd use my money. "Rachel's keen to be a real estate mogul," White explained. "She's using Leo as her entry point, but if Kane's empire collapses, she'll lose her chance and risk her career." He showed me a brief video of the meeting. "This is more than you need to see," he warned. That evening, Rachel came home, seemingly cheerful, and offered to go over the prospectus with me. She described the property with enthusiasm, pitching it as a solid investment with great cash flow. She added that Kane needed funds for a new luxury condo project. "It's a great opportunity, Bob. I'll review the numbers tomorrow," I said. "I might even invest more than the $3 million you suggested. Is that possible?" Her eyes lit up. "Absolutely. That would be amazing." The next day, pretending to study the proposal, I already knew it was a bad deal. I called her, asking, "Would you mind if I share this with some overseas business contacts?" "Yes, please. That would make the deal even better," she replied excitedly. I thought to myself, better for whom? You or your partners? I kept my tone friendly. "I'll make some calls and see what I can do." Later that day, I began packing my valuables into a rented Cadillac Escalade, preparing for my move to Scottsdale. I told Rachel I'd be meeting with potential investors in Phoenix, hinting I might contribute an additional $2 million, which thrilled her. "That would be perfect, Bob. Just perfect," she squeaked, fully convinced. On my way to Scottsdale, I took a break in Kansas City, booking a secure motel room with surveillance for the car. I'd arranged for a new weapon safe to be delivered to my house in Scottsdale, identical to the one in Chicago. The drive was smooth, with Sirius Radio keeping me company, and it felt liberating to be away from Rachel's schemes. A week later, I returned to Chicago and told Rachel I'd managed to secure $10 million for the investment. I spent the next few weeks setting up an LLC and negotiating documents, aiming to stall until Leo's financial troubles worsened. One morning, as Rachel was leaving for work, I told her, "We're almost ready to sign. But before we finalize, I want to talk about our future." She looked intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I think it's time for you to stop working so hard for others and focus on our investments. Maybe even consider having children. What do you think?" She smiled. "That would be great for us. Thank you, Bob." She left, visibly pleased, but later, I discovered she'd gone straight to Leo's office to celebrate with him and Harper. The following week, I signed the final investment papers at Kane's office. Everyone was congratulating each other, with Harper and Kane exchanging smug glances. Leo asked, "When's the money coming?" "It'll be transferred from Switzerland to your bank account soon," I replied. I flew to the Middle East the next day, intending for the funds transfer to happen while I was out of the country. The last trace of John Marshall was a passport stamp at O'Hare International Airport. From my base overseas, I monitored the security cameras at home. Late one night, I saw Rachel in bed with Harper. Without hesitation, I triggered the fire alarm remotely, causing chaos. The fire department spent an hour searching for the source, baffled. Due to the time difference, Rachel and I missed each other on FaceTime, but eventually we connected. Her tone was cold. "When is the money coming?" "It's been over a week since you signed the papers," she growled. I chuckled. "The money's in my account, ready to transfer, but the banks here are closed. I'll send it tomorrow when they open." "Oh, okay, love you," she replied flatly. "Yeah, me too," I said, ending the call. That night, John Marshall ceased to exist. With Rachel alone in the house, I triggered the emergency strobe lights in the bedroom and activated a loudspeaker in the adjacent room. The flashing lights startled her, and I watched as she bolted upright in bed. From halfway across the world, I orchestrated her discomfort with precision, a final move in the game I'd been planning. I activated the microphone and said, "Rachel, help me. They're eliminating me. Please, no. I love you, Rachel." Then I cut the power, leaving her in silence. Through the camera, I saw her become hysterical, crying and barely able to breathe. She grabbed the phone and called Harper. "Mike, something's happened. I think I'm losing my mind. I heard Bob calling my name, like he was being killed. Can you come over?" "Calm down," he replied, sounding annoyed. "Have some milk and go to bed." Just then, my phone rang. It was her. I let it ring, then smashed it to pieces, cutting off her last way of reaching me. With no other contacts or information about the money, she was blindsided. Without that $10 million, the Kane conglomerate would collapse, and she'd likely be fired from the bank. Her plan to become a real estate mogul was in ruins, and her salary wouldn't support her lifestyle. She had $1 million house, but with both our names on the title, she couldn't sell or mortgage it without my signature. Alone, blindsided, and unable to cover her expenses, she had lost everything. In Illinois, a person can only be declared dead after 7 years without contact or 12 weeks with proof of death, such as a confirmed disaster. No Army or CIA records would confirm John Marshall's death. Under the pretext of protecting my family from insurgents, the CIA supervisor would freeze my personnel file and deny any contact with me. For Rachel, the wait to access the house or any assets would be a long 7 years. I watched her over the next few days as she hoped for any sign of Bob's survival. Meanwhile, my Marine friends offered their support, each wanting to help in their own way. But I had something longer lasting in mind, one final act of revenge. To set the stage, we went outside the compound and set up 2 tables under a blue tarp. One Marine dressed as a rebel posed with an AK-47, and I positioned myself under the tarp with only my head visible. They applied chalk to my face to make me look pale, darkened my lips, and added blood, using ketchup around my neck. The result was a convincingly grisly photo of a decapitated Bob with his blue eyes staring blankly. 3 weeks later, 2 Marines in dress uniforms knocked on Rachel's door. Harper opened it, dismissive, saying, "We've already donated to the Salvation Army." But a Marine size 11 boot blocked the door. "We're here to speak with Mrs. John Markshall about her husband," he said sternly. Inside, Rachel's face turned pale as she took in the sight of the Marines. "Are you Mrs. John Markshall?" one asked. "Yes," she whispered. "We have a photo of an American who was liquidated. We believe it may be your husband. This photo is our only form of identification since DNA was impossible to retrieve," he said, producing the picture. She gasped, her face draining of color. "Let me see." As soon as she saw the image, she started sobbing uncontrollably. No, why him? We were going to start a family. He even called to me the night he died." She broke down completely. "Where are the rest of him?" The Marine maintained his expression. 30 bodies were bulldozed into a pit. The heads were piled up separately. At this, she began vomiting, overwhelmed by both grief and the financial catastrophe now looming over her. "We're sorry for the terrible news. Would you like us to call anyone?" one asked. "No, I'll be fine," she managed, still shaking as the Marines turned to leave. One of them carefully placed the photo back in his briefcase. Across the street, my Marine friends couldn't contain their laughter at the part they'd played in her downfall. As they got into the car, they heard Harper yelling inside the house, "Where's the $10 million? What happened to the $10 million? How do we get our $10 million? We're going to lose everything without it." With her financial empire shattered and her support gone, Rachel had lost everything she'd schemed for. And as for Bob, he had disappeared, taking everything with him, leaving nothing but a ghost in his wake.